Hi, it's John from Android Addicts, and today we're doing a gaming FPS test between the Snapdragon 888 and the Exynos 2100. So all the games in this video are 120 frames per second and 120Hz compatible, and we're just starting off with Alto's Adventure here. This is quite a nice, smooth and calming game. As you can see, you just ski down this hill, and both phones handle this really well, no issues whatsoever. You'll notice that the Exynos temperature there is static. I've had to put that in manually because you can't monitor the CPU temperature with PerfDog, it doesn't support that. So the Snapdragon temperature there is a live feed of the actual temperature read from the phone. So what I did though, I just took the highest temperature from the Exynos during the gameplay for that game and put it on the screen. So we have a look at the FPS chart here. Don't worry too much about the average FPS because you can see there were times I spent sat in the menu. So just look at the number of drops basically for each processor. And like I said, both absolutely fine for this game. So we're moving on to Dead Trigger 2 here. And again, this is a really well optimized game. No issues at all whilst playing, apart from my gameplay maybe. But yeah, quite a fun game to play, just blasting zombies. And it works really smoothly on both phones.
I'll take that. Oh, hello. How's it going?
And as you can see here, again from the FPS chart, it does look like the Snapdragon had a few drops there between the 3 and 8 minute mark, but it wasn't anything I noticed during the gameplay. So next up we have Grimvalor. Now this is probably the only one where the Exynos seemed to struggle a fair bit more than the Snapdragon here. You can see the frames dropping quite a bit. Now I was in the same area here on both, so it's not that I was in a particularly intense area on the Exynos, but it is interesting that this game did have drop issues on the Exynos. There's the odd one every now and again on the Snapdragon, but nothing too drastic in comparison to the Exynos. But again, as I've said previously, it's not really something you'd notice during the gameplay. What is interesting though is the temperature difference here. You can see that the Snapdragon's at 43 degrees Celsius, where the Exynos is a lot cooler, running at 38 degrees. And here you can see in the FPS charts exactly what I was describing there, that the Exynos did struggle with Grimvalor for some reason. Okay, next up we have Skyforce Reloaded. This game has been around for a long time, so it's extremely well optimized on both chipsets here. No issues whatsoever. I don't normally play this sort of game to be honest, but it's actually strangely addictive.
Nice.
Chain loss. Weapon upgrade. Weapon upgrade. Human rescue.
Nice.
Weapon upgrade.
And as you can see here from the results, both phones, absolutely no problem whatsoever. Okay, next up we're moving on to Subway Surfers. Again, this game has been out for quite a long time as well now, and it's very well optimized on both phones, or both CPUs I should say. The Snapdragon is running a couple of degrees hotter than the Exynos. Now I will just point out I did have the Thermal Guardian installed on the Exynos here, so I have actually made the thermal threshold 2 degrees higher, but it didn't seem to get any hotter, so it's quite happy sitting around 36 degrees most of the time. As you can see from the charts there, no issues to report whatsoever. Okay, next up, this is an interesting one, Rayman Adventures. Now, I don't know if it's just me getting old, but this seemed to run way too quickly to actually play very easily. So, I don't know whether it's originally intended to run at 120 frames per second, but it just seems much too fast and difficult to actually control Rayman and tell him where you want to go. I've played other running games before, and this one just seems way too fiddly to actually get exactly where you want to go. That being said though, both phones ran this with absolutely no issues whatsoever. Snapdragon actually running a bit cooler for this one, 35 degrees, whereas the Exynos got up to 36 degrees. So looking at the charts here, we can see again, both phones, no issues whatsoever. Next, we're moving on to Modern Combat Versus here. This is your sort of Halo style shooter. It's quite a good game actually. I'm just playing against bots here. But basically you can see both phones do struggle a fair amount with this game. Snapdragon's gone all the way up to 45 degrees here, whereas the Snapdragon's gone up to 38 degrees. But yeah, I think it's probably down to the different graphical effects and different moves, as you can see, that do make both phones struggle a bit here. I'm sure with a bit of optimization from Gameloft, it could get smoothened out a bit, but it's not really something you notice whilst playing the game.
Barely. Warning! Zone is being contested! And that makes 3. Target's here. On me. 4 kills. Heads up! Zone is being contested! 4 on the floor. Triple kill. Dude!
Okay, you can see here the charts. The Snapdragon seems to struggle a bit more than the Exynos, but these are slightly different scales, but you can see the average is a tiny bit lower on the Snapdragon there. Okay, next up we have Trials Frontier, and this, similar to Rayman, just seems to run way too quickly at 120 frames per second, and it makes it extremely hard to control. So I'm used to playing Trials on the Xbox ever since the original Trials on the 360, which I imagine probably ran at 30, maybe 60 frames per second. But running at 120 frames per second just seems way too quick and very difficult to keep up with. Again, it could be my age, but it is something I did notice, specifically with this and with Rayman. That being said, both phones running absolutely fine. Exynos may be dropping a few more frames than the Snapdragon, but when it's running this fast, it isn't something you're going to notice. Again, temperature-wise, the Snapdragon running 3 degrees hotter than the Exynos. And if you look at the charts here, wouldn't worry too much about all those dips, that's just me restarting and going to different levels. Okay, next up is Standoff 2. This is a Counter-Strike equivalent for Android, and I'll just point out now I am absolutely terrible at this game. I hadn't played it before, but I'm not a huge fan of touch controls for FPSs, to be honest, but yeah, it really did show here how bad I am. But still, it's quite a good game. Lots of Russians playing, so they're probably on it 24/7, but yeah, it is quite difficult with the touch controls. For me, I'm sure most younger people out there would have no problems whatsoever. But as we can see from the frames anyway, there are no issues running this at 120 frames per second. Snapdragon, 42 degrees, quite warm. The Exynos is just plodding along here at 34 degrees with no issues whatsoever. So again, charts, you can see no issues at all here on either phone. Slightly higher average on the Exynos, but there are different timescales there. Okay, last up we have Vainglory. So this is your Dota 2 equivalent, which has been around for a few years now. It's quite good fun. Games don't last too long. And you can see here the frames per second running at around 120 for both all the time. Just the odd drop every now and again with the explosions or special moves that get activated every now and again. Snapdragon is running 5 degrees hotter than the Exynos, but it doesn't seem to affect the frame rate at all. It's not being throttled. One thing I did notice on both these phones is the movement of the character is really jerky. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. It's probably just a glitch or bug for the S21 series. It was quite annoying though. See the Exynos dropping down to around 100 there, but overall the average is pretty similar for both of them. So there we have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I think overall both CPUs are very comparable here. What the Exynos drops in frames in one game, the Snapdragon might drop in another game, so they're very, very similar to each other. If you did have to pick one to say which was the overall best, I'd probably still go with the Snapdragon with the Adreno 640. It does seem to handle everything very well, but then it does run quite a few degrees hotter. So I'm lucky that I'm living in a cool country in the UK, but if you do live in a hot country, then you may start experiencing issues with throttling. Like I said, I had the Thermal Guardian installed here on the Exynos just to push the thermal threshold an additional 2 degrees, but this didn't really make any difference here in this test because the CPU didn't actually get that hot. So again, leave a comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are. If you want to become a member of the channel, then click on the join button, that really helps out. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.